Warning, this video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Today's integration has been so professionally and seamlessly woven into the narrative you may fail to notice when the advertisement begins. Regulation stipulates that you must be aware of the presence of paid-for product placement, so when that happens you will be notified by the presence of this siren. Thank you. Hello everybody, today we are once again talking about Ferrari, easily one of the world's most divisive car brands. Some love it, some hate it, and others just don't get it. I am in the very fortunate position where I can say now that my own opinion of the brand comes not just from all the things that I've heard and seen over the last few decades, but also from several years of being lucky enough to call myself a Ferrari owner. I'm sure more than a few of you have noticed that over the last couple of years, every time I do seem to talk about one of my own cars, it's been in the context of trying to explain why it's been absent from the channel and my driveway for quite so long, and the many thousands of pounds that it has cost me. And this, of course, has led to a plethora of comments from various people, understandably questioning my sanity, asking why I didn't just go and buy a Porsche instead, because surely my life would have been much easier, and telling me, of course, my Ferraris are a miserable ownership experience. That's what they're all like. And so in today's video, I want to address exactly that topic and discuss with you in a very frank and open way my history with the brand, why it is that I've wanted a Ferrari for quite so long, how I feel now that I've got one, well, more than one, but we'll get on to that, and whether I think it is really worth it, and well, loads of other good stuff too. Anyway, let's get on with it. Who are new to the channel, I'll give you a little potted history of my Ferrari ownership. It began 3 years ago with a purchase of a 550, one of my childhood dream cars, along with the F355 and the F50. One day I would like to be able to buy an F355, and recently I did a video explaining exactly why I haven't yet. The F50, unfortunately, is still some way off. I actually did get offered a drive of an F50, and if you're wondering why I didn't leap at that chance, it came with one small proviso, which is that I had to insure it for £3 million. So not only could I not afford to buy an F50, it turns out I can't even afford to insure one. So yeah, one day I hope to find a solution to that problem, but it's not going to be soon. After I bought the 550, I dabbled with a Lamborghini Gallardo, which I will admit was not the best example in the world. In fact, I'd wager it was one of the worst examples in the world, and that didn't really go very well at all. Once that car was sold, I decided I wanted another supercar, and long story short, I wound up with a 430 Scuderia, a car that I never imagined I would ever own. This is the stripped-out, lightweight, hardcore version of the F430, the successor to the Challenge Stradale and the predecessor to the 458 Speziale. And it is one of those that I'm driving today. This was not the first one that I bought, it is the second. The first one got returned because there were issues with it that couldn't be solved, and I'm really not helping the case for Ferrari, am I? Then, last year, I managed to make my pair a trio when I bought an F12. I love the setup that I have because, to me, each car represents not just a different flavour, but a different era of Ferrari too. So the 550 is, to me, a classic, proper, old-school Ferrari. Front-engined V12 Grand Tourer with the all-important manual gated shifter. This then is the lightweight, hardcore, focused, stripped-out road racer that is really quite a laugh when you are in the mood. The F12, meanwhile, kind of strikes a balance between the pair of them. I think it's easily one of the prettiest cars Ferrari have ever made, and it is also easily the best-sounding car I have ever owned. But right here, right now, at the time of recording, this 430 Scuderia has a suspension knock, which is the very problem that forced me to return the last one because it was so difficult to be solved. It has just cost me £8,000 in repairs. I haven't seen the 550 essentially for a year, and when I did, it was only for about 2 weeks because it had been away for a very long time having stuff sorted, and then when it was returned, I realised there were some other outstanding issues too. The F12, meanwhile, has just been shipped back down to Meridian Modena because it's developed an issue that was serious enough that I really didn't feel safe driving the car. More on that in a separate video. Winding the clock back a little bit, it's actually very difficult to work out exactly the point at which I realised I wanted a Ferrari. And if anything, I'm pretty sure if you asked 7-year-old James what his dream car would have been, it would either be a Lamborghini Diablo, courtesy of the game Need for Speed Special Edition, presented by RoadStr no less, or the McLaren F1 LM. Not the peasant spec one, not the ordinary one, no. It had to be the LM, because that's the only one I actually ever felt looked just about right. I've never actually gelled with the looks of the regular F1. Not that I'd kick one out of bed, of course, but as I can't insure an F50, I don't think I'm going to be driving an F1 anytime soon. Certainly don't think McLaren are going to invite me to drive theirs. I did, however, through friends and family, know a few people with Ferraris, and when I say a few people, I really mean not just sort of single digits, but maybe 2 or 3 tops. Back then, a Ferrari was a really genuinely rare thing. In fact, when I was at school, my dad bought a 996, and today we probably look down upon that as sort of equivalent really to a Z3, Z4, or an MX-5. However, back then, that was a big deal. My friend Sean at school told my class that he was really excited that that day he was going to go out in my dad's new Porsche. And I remember that day very, very well. I can picture the scene precisely because I was really embarrassed because this was a very, very expensive thing to have, and I was kind of a little bit shy about the whole thing. I got over my shyness in the end, as you probably guessed, although weirdly actually in social situations I am awful. I'll just kind of try and hide in a corner. However, that does tell you a little bit about the kind of environment in which I grew up. It wasn't a poor area at all. It was Bury St Edmunds. It's actually quite affluent, but I'm not really sure anyone else's dad had a Porsche. Certainly not a brand new one. In case you're wondering, it was a C4 Tiptronic, and he did regret the Tiptronic bit. I expect really the person probably most responsible for my lusting for Ferraris is Jeremy Clarkson. I've no doubt that's the same for many people. The 355 in particular, having been dubbed the greatest car in the world ever in his video Clarkson Unleashed on Cars, was a very, very powerful statement. I ignored the fact that years later he sort of recanted that, but to me the 355 was always the one. In the follow-up video to that, Apocalypse Clarkson, he then declared the 550 the best handling car in the world ever, and that's part of the reason that I bought mine. It likely didn't also help that years later Evo magazine came to essentially the same conclusion, and when I did begin driving, I developed a real appreciation for decent handling cars. As soon as I set foot in a Lotus, I knew that handling really was the thing that mattered to me, because power you can't really use all the time, but handling you can. It's probably also worth mentioning at this point that when I talk about handling, a lot of people think you just mean grip. I often slated Subarus for having really poor handling, and people would go, oh, what are you talking about? They're brilliant. Well, actually, no, they're really, really front heavy, and they're kind of unwieldy in a corner without a lot of help. But to me, handling is about how the car talks to you. Road holding is almost an entirely separate thing. I've driven plenty of cars that handle beautifully, but don't have that much grip. most old cars. 205 GTI doesn't actually have masses of grip compared to a lot of modern stuff, but it handles beautifully. You're not afraid to use everything that it has, and then on occasion a little bit more. In any case, growing up, seeing a Ferrari, or any supercar really, out and about on the road was a very, very rare event. And at that time, I did promise myself, whatever car I did get when I was older, if it was something nice, something spicy, unlike all the people who I knew then that seemed to find any and every excuse to not drive their cars, I'd try and find just about any excuse to drive it. Let's be honest, you can't take them with you, so you may as well enjoy them. And I like to think I've kept the promise I made to my younger self. Busy though I may be, I will still always try and make time to enjoy the things that I've managed to acquire. And I do that by trying to be efficient with the time that I have. Today's video is really all about finding a balance in life, and one thing that has genuinely helped me has been HelloFresh. See, I love cooking, but often I find I just don't have the time to research recipes, work out which one I actually like, get to the shops, only to find out they're missing that one key ingredient that ties the whole dish together. HelloFresh gives me a huge range of meals to choose from, with everything from calorie controlled to vegan and quick cook options. Today I'm having their spicy beef quesadillas, and they're so easy to make I'm actually having them between filming sessions. All I needed to add to the recipe was a dash of olive oil and some salt and pepper. They provide everything else. The results are tasty, easy, and they give you all the nutritional information you need if you're into counting that sort of thing. HelloFresh is so much tastier than a ready meal, but still gives me the satisfaction of actually cooking, but takes out all the faff of trying to plan. For a busy housewife like myself, it's an absolute essential, and if you fancy trying it out for yourself, you can scan the QR code on the screen, or follow my link down below and use code JAYEMM60 for an incredible 60% off your first box, and 25% off the next 8. A big thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. So then to me, working out whether these are a car that's really worth it comes down to two simple things. First off, how much is it actually costing to have these things? And secondly, what price do you put on what it is that they deliver? So first off, being honest with you, buying the 550 cost £68,000. Buying the 430, this one, was £180,000, and the F12 was about £150,000. In terms of outright value, the 550 is probably worth about what I paid for it, maybe a little bit more. I'd like to think a little bit more, and I'd hoped 550 values would go up, but they sort of haven't. My one has a lot of miles on it, 103,000, of which I've done 10,000, mostly in the first year. So I did and do really enjoy driving that car. This one is probably worth a little bit less than I paid because I have put some miles on it. It's now on 23,000, and I think it was just under 20 when I got it. And the F12 is again probably worth maybe a little bit more than I paid. So in terms of just pure depreciation, they've kind of held their money. The cost, though, has been in running them. Fuel. Well, on a run, the 550, surprisingly, as the old V12, is actually the best. It does, at a sort of sustained 70-ish on a motorway, 22 to the gallon. This, then, weirdly, is the second best at 22 to the gallon, and maybe, unsurprisingly, the F12 is the worst at 15.5. The fuel economy thing, though, never really bothered me. You get people asking you, how do you afford the fuel for these things? It's like, well, when you decide to go for a journey in a Ferrari, you know it's going to cost you quite a bit of money. That's just the nature of the beast. It's like buying a first-class rail ticket. You're not going to get there any quicker, really, but you may have a nicer time doing so. And let's be honest here, how many times have you seen someone driving along in an old 3-litre Capri or a Ford Mustang from the 60s or 70s and gone, ooh, wonder how he affords the fuel in that? You don't, do you? Because you just look at someone having a good time in their car and you kind of forget about that stuff. Same with tyres. With the F12, people always ask me how much tyres cost. It's $1,000 for the whole car. Like, that's not really much different to many other regular sports cars that cost quite a bit less. Servicing is also another topic that I think, honestly, is just really, really overblown because, no, they're not cheap. Compared to anything like an M3 or even a 911, they are expensive. Give you a rough idea, a big service on this is like 1,400 quid. On the 550, it's about 1,700 on the F12. I think it's sort of somewhere around either of those figures. However, it's the maintenance, it's the repair bills. They're the thing that gets you. It baffles me that I see people these days saying, oh, I don't want a 355, you've got to do cam belts every 3 years, and that costs a lot of money. Yeah, an extra $1,000 every 3 years, and honestly, if that's an amount to put you off buying a car, do not buy any Ferrari, full stop. So, in terms of the 550, I reckon I've spent probably about £20,000. This I've spent, I reckon, once I've done everything I need to do, about £11,000, and on the F12, probably a similar amount. It cost me about $5,000 a few months ago for a big service, a few bits of work, and I've sent it back. It's going to need a fix, and if it is what I think is broken, I'm also going to sort some other cosmetic stuff, and again, you're going to be talking about another sort of £4,000 or £5,000 bill. That's a lot of money. And I will admit that is a lot more money than I really had hoped or expected. The 550, we're now getting into sort of near restoration territory, and that one actually doesn't bother me too much because I own that outright. This and the F12 are on finance, for which I pay, I think it's $1,250 a month, I think, for the F12, and just over $1,000 for this. This one has a much bigger deposit, so that's why it's cheaper a month, despite the fact that it was a more expensive car to buy. If you were to try and buy them these days on finance, you'd be paying a lot more because interest rates have gone up quite a bit since I got them, and that is one reason I've been happy to hold onto them. I have considered changing the F12 at various points in time, but the fact is I could buy something that was a lot cheaper and wind up paying the same or more, and my man brain will not allow it. I've talked about the way all of these cars drive in separate videos, and if you want to know a bit more about that in detail, please watch those. We just don't have the time today. But I've got to say, and this is a very personal thing, everyone is going to see it differently, but for me, opening the door, even just getting the keys, opening the door and sitting down in your Ferrari, that's a big thing. Like, I've been there for a few of my friends who've gotten their first Ferrari, and it's always a big deal. And there is something about Ferrari, because I know people that have had McLarens and people that have had Lamborghinis and other sorts of stuff, and I'd say Lamborghini is maybe the only other brand that can truly hold a candle to Ferrari in terms of how special other people perceive it to be. But you tell anyone you've got a Ferrari and it will elicit a response. In all fairness, I've nearly never had much grief from people when out and about in the cars. Maybe it's because I try and be a considerate driver, I don't rev the thing in the middle of town. Maybe it's because the cars are a little bit older. Maybe if you went out in a brand new 296 convertible and were revving it up in the middle of town, people would call you a Burke and all sorts of other four-letter words. But actually I find, particularly with the 550 and the F12, it's the front engine cars. People love the front engine cars. They get a great response. People that don't know cars walk up to me and say how much they like them. Although I will also say, particularly for the F12, when you're out and about and you're not even being silly with it, you do get a lot of angry people going when you're doing like 45 in a 60. I think it's because it's so big and makes quite a great noise. People think it's going a lot faster than it is. You get the same thing in a Nissan GTR. The speed thing, I suppose, is a component of it. I mean, look, they're quick cars, okay? I mean, even this one, 500 horsepower, 1,400 kilos, it shifts. Love driving it. I've got an Audi R8 on the driveway this week, and that's a fabulous thing. But this is just a different animal entirely. The other weird thing, and one reason I've stuck to Ferraris as opposed to going to the likes of Lamborghini, is that they are really practical. This is the hardcore, lightweight, stripped out one, and yet there's plenty of space in it. Far more space in the cabin of this than in the R8 that I've been driving. Okay, that's a Spider, but even compared to the Coupe, this is far more generous. You've got a lovely big storage area behind where I can put a tripod easily. That is partly because this doesn't have a stereo, but you also have a huge boot. Everyone is shocked when you open the front and they see how big the boot is. Lamborghini owners stand there going, how is the Aventador so much bigger than this and yet still has a boot that's, I mean, literally, I think less than half the size? That's madness. The F12's great on a run. It's super comfortable, really nice. People call it a supercar. It's not. I've taken it on track, and when you take it on track, you realize it's not. It's a super GT. Soft, comfy, lovely, but when you're in the mood, oh crikey. I was up in Scotland just driving about one day with the F12, and the conditions were like they are now. It's dry, you could see, but the roads were really super quiet. And I had my music on, despite the fact the speakers in that car are atrocious. I do need to fix that. Ferrari should be embarrassed by their stereos, they really should. Anyway, YouTube Music was on its super mix, and it was on one. There were some bangers that night, but then it played a double whammy of Get Ready by 2 Unlimited. You know, dun 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 dun. I've probably done a terrible impression. And Techno Syndrome, the theme tune from Mortal Kombat. Yeah, I'm glad no one saw me that night. What a car. What a car. The F12 in particular takes a long, long time to build trust with it, to build faith in it, and it's just delectable. It's absolutely superb. And the really lovely thing is that, you know, I've had the 3 for a while, and yet they've each got their own personality. You spend some time in the F12 and you think, maybe this is going to be horrible and rubbish and nasty. No, it's still comfy, still lovely. I can put the window down and it's not noisy. It's great. And then when the 550 does reappear and you go, I spent time in the F12, it's basically the same thing, but, you know, a decade and a half on, is it going to feel horrid and rubbish? No! In some ways, the 550 is the best of all of them to drive. It's true. The steering is just brilliant, the gearbox is amazing, and the engine, even now, even in 2023, it's mighty. I can only imagine what it must have been like to someone back in 1996. That is a powerhouse. And it's a beautiful, elegant car, somewhat understated. I love that. The Roma I drove recently, it's a very similar thing. I love that Ferrari have the ability to go, okay, we've been playing around with aero and this and the other, but you know what? We're going to stop. We're going to try and create something that's just pretty, something that's nice to look at. I love that. Dealing with the company has been an added bonus. Honestly, like, you know, the fact I've got a relationship with Ferrari UK and therefore the Ferrari factory is a wonderful and a nice thing, but it really doesn't change my opinion of the brand or its products. I do not get free servicing, I do not get free parts and all that sort of stuff, and I've got the bills to prove it. And yeah, I wish they didn't cost me quite as much as they do, but here's the thing. My Celica GT4, my Toyota, that is a couple of years older than the 550, I'm into that for about the same spend. About 20 odd grand I've put into that car, and it wasn't even remotely a sort of, you know, bad or terrible car when I got it. My Honda S2000, okay, the engine went bang and I've now spent a lot of money upgrading it, but I probably would have done that anyway, and I'm into that for 25 to 30,000 pounds. Okay, you could argue that, James, that's upgrades, that's not maintaining. Yep, fine, okay. My Citroen BX, I bought that for like 3,000 quid, and I've spent about 5 or 6 on top. I know people with Toyota MR2s that they got essentially for free, that they're into for thousands and thousands of pounds. My BMW M3, that had to have its engine rebuilt. Like, cars are expensive. Old cars are expensive. If you think that an old air-cooled 911 in particular is going to be much cheaper to run than something like this generation Ferrari, you are kidding yourself. It's just not the case. And yeah, there's stuff you have to be aware of. I'll never take this in a multi-story car park, just full stop. The F12's fine, it's got a suspension lift. This does not, and it will hit the ground. And it's happened to me about 3 times, and honestly, you feel like you're going to get out of the car and there's just nothing of the front of it left, but somehow it's been okay. And so realistically, on many roads, particularly ones I don't know, I'd probably drive something else faster, but that's not what I have the Ferrari for. I have it for the theatre, the drama. This one in particular, I mean, with its, you know, many, many beeps That's the reverse, by the way. Not the reversing sensors, it doesn't have those. Just to remind you that you are in reverse. One day I'll probably appreciate that. It's got single clutch gearbox, which you have to work with, but when it is in the mood, will deliver the most delicious and amazing shifts. And you know what? I never got into any of the Ferraris for financial gain. I got into them because I wanted them. And we're going to admit something a little bit sad here. When I grew up, it was still, I think, that era, it was the 90s really, where the car you drove did dictate a lot about how successful you'd been in life. And the people that had been most successful, they had a Ferrari. The people I looked up to, they had a Ferrari. Now, you may think that is horrible, materialistic and awful, but I did promise you I'd be honest. And that is honest. And, you know, driving along here, looking down at the horsey, and the horsey has to be on a yellow background, that's just how it is for me. To me, it's just my way of kind of treating myself and going, you've done all right, you know? Oh, and by the way, if you're watching, I do have you to thank, because without your support, I couldn't have done this. If you've got this far in the video and you haven't subscribed, please hit that button now, do it. It costs you nothing. Tick the bell icon as well if you don't mind. And it really is a life-changing thing that you can do for us YouTubers. There is, though, another element that I think is perhaps a little less self-centered. There's a German word called Schadenfreude, and it basically means taking joy in the suffering of others. To quote Avenue Q, that is German, isn't it? And I would like to think maybe there is a word, perhaps it is in your language if English is not your native tongue, for the opposite of that. Not feeling sad about people being happy, but, you know, joy through others being happy. And that, to me, is actually the number one reason that I keep the Ferraris, because, like it or not, Ferraris are a special thing. Even in the age of the internet and vloggers and social media and everything, maybe they're not quite as rare as they once were. But even for me, seeing a Ferrari out and about is an event. I get annoyed when I'm out and about and I see a Ferrari and I'm not in mine, because I can't test whether you get the fellow Ferrari owner wave. Thus far, when it has happened, I have got one, meaning Ferrari owners are far less miserable than Porsche owners. And can you put a price on happiness? But anyway, the point I'm making here is the fact that I remember very, very well being a kid, going along, and if you saw a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, or in my case, a Noble out and about, I saw a Pagani Zonda once, a yellow Pagani Zonda RoadStr. Like, what? What? That made my day. I still remember it. I saw a Diablo once down the road. That was just, I mean, that made the whole day worth it. Just being out at 11 o'clock at night and someone was filling up a Diablo at near midnight. Like, what? And, you know, I would always, like, you know, give a big thumbs up to anyone with a nice car and everything, and I'd just stand there being like, oh my God, that's so cool, I want that. And so I like to think that when I drive past someone in one of my Ferraris and there's a kid there going, oh mate, love it, like, or if you're in Essex, rev it, that I've made their day. And somehow, in some small, weird, kind of oddball little way, I've made the world just a tiny bit better. Just a weeny bit. It's my just microscopic little contribution. I've no doubt someone out there is going like, yeah, well, James, you just killed that child, really, with your exhaust fumes. And, yeah, okay. Great, yeah. There's lots and lots and lots of things in life that we can moan about. And trust me, I've not had a good week. Let's just put it like that. Yet, through this week, I've still tried to carry on, still tried to sort of be business as usual. And part of that is getting in cars like this, going out and about, filming, talking to all of you lovely people. And though you don't talk back to me immediately, eventually you do. And this is just this wonderful thing. I had a great meet organised via RoadStr the other day at a local pub. And all these fantastic people came out. And if you're watching this and you're at that meet, I got some stuff going on and you've no idea how just much I needed that. And, you know, ultimately, friends through cars and friends through Ferraris and everything just makes it all worth it. You know, I love these. I'm willing to make the sacrifice. Yes, James, you selfless person. You own these Ferraris. It's you and Mother Teresa, really. Actually, weirdly, my mum's name is Teresa. Anyway, I should also give special mention to some of the friends that I've made in the YouTube community, essentially through the Ferraris, the likes of Scott, Ratarossa, Jack, number 27, and of course Anthony from Sports and Touring and JAYEMM Friends. All of them have become very, very good pals, Anthony in particular, and there's a whole bunch of others too. People like Laurie from Laurie's Mechanical Marvels, who's a big part of the channel from day one, and so many others, and I'm sure there's a few that I've forgotten, and if you're in that list, I'm really, really sorry, but I'm thinking of you, I just can't remember your name. I just love it, and I'm going to keep driving them, and I know I'm going to lose money on them because I'm driving them, and I keep speaking to people saying, like, oh, I've got a car, it's low mileage, oh, I can't drive it though, but the fact is, no, you can. What you mean is, you just don't want to spend the money on it, you don't want to lose the money. Well, you see, I've got a promise to keep to a young JM, that now I've got these things, I'm going to continue to enjoy them. And on that, I don't think I can put a price. So there we go. I am sure I've missed out a whole bunch of stuff, probably some of it quite important. If you'd like to know a little bit more about my Ferraris, my ownership experience, I'm going to put some links to some key videos in the description down below. But for now, all that really remains to be said is a huge thanks to all of you for being a part of this journey, whether you've been here from the beginning or this as the very first video that you've watched. Don't forget to hit that like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.